It's so great to be here. I can't tell you how nice it is for me to speak in the San Francisco Bay Area. For some reason, I just flew in from New York and to speak locally. So I'm leaving for Chicago on Monday. I mean, it's just so nice, especially to be here with such a wonderful group of women. So thank you for inviting me. Before we get started, what I'd like to do is have you turn to the person sitting next to you and just in 30 seconds, tell them how you think that your life and maybe your life goals are different than your grandmother's and your mother's might have been. Let's just take 30 seconds to do that. Hey, anybody willing to share what you came up with? Anyone?
I will.
Yes.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, what's your name?
My name's Alicia. I'm a senior at SCU, an undergrad, so it's great to see all these wonderful MBA students and professionals and our great speaker. Anywho, so something that was similar between myself and another group member was that both of our moms stopped their careers when they had children. So it's great that you've been able to have a family and continue your professional interests. So I think that's
not easy.
Not easy, but so far in my life, I think I'll focus more on my career as I go forward. And up to this point, education has also been a huge motivating factor. So that's something.
Great. Thank you very much. I think I saw a hand over here somewhere. Yes.
A lot of our grandmothers were immigrants.
Immigrants.
So the whole focus was on just raising your family and
just trying to survive. Yeah, that survival mode.
Yep.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Interesting. Anyone else? Well, what I'm struck by is that all of us, we are part of a great human leap forward. It's kind of a demographic shift that is going to, I believe, transform our world. I mean, I really do believe that women are this big change agent that will have dramatic impact. Think about it like this. After thousands of years of economic dependency, because women were always the economically dependent party, we see a critical mass of women like yourselves gaining education, gaining earning power, and turning that earning power and education into influence. So we haven't come as far as we ought to have come, and there's still lots of work to be done, and we all have examples of that. But I think we need to pause and take a moment to recognize the fact that we really are transformative figures, and we have the opportunity to use that influence. So what I hope to do here this morning is just give you a little bit of a taste of it. A lot of the stuff is from my book, but also I've had the great fortune from writing my book to get involved in a lot of more studies to drill down further into the subject of women and money and the influence that it creates. And in fact, I was just part of the Wall Street Journal's Women in the Economy task force this last week, which in fact they're going to be printing the results of that in next Monday's, I guess the 11th, whatever that is, in the Wall Street Journal, so please look for it. But what I really want to make sure that we really see is that we have really, building off of what you just said, we have really come from being at a level of economic survival at best to, in fact, moving to a place of influence. In fact, if we go back just a little bit of time, we know that in the past, women couldn't even own property. In fact, they were considered property. So your grandmothers and great-grandmothers, more likely, could not even have personal possessions that belonged to them. In fact, it belonged to their husbands, and they were considered owned by their husbands. They couldn't open a bank account, let alone an investment account, and in fact, they couldn't vote to change any of those laws. So when you think about it, and this is really interesting, when Thomas Jefferson was putting together the Declaration of Independence, he wrote, "All men are created equal." He was being very literal. It just didn't apply to women. So what else is very interesting is all you here are educations. Whoa, that makes a lot of sense. You've pursued your education and pursued it beautifully. I mean, well, how many in this room are pursuing an MBA or already have one? Yeah, that's amazing. Because in the past, most women were not encouraged to pursue education at all. In fact, it was something that was considered for the wealthy. Sort of an extravagance, because most women would go on and just get married and have families. It was considered a waste of resources. And that was pretty much the way the world worked until the baby boom generation. Now, anyone here a baby boomer born between 46 and 64? Yeah, me too. We're part of that generation that was the first en masse to enter the education system, gain that education, and in fact, go into the workforce in large numbers and actually stay there, not just enter, but stay there. That was a huge transformation. But sticking to the education piece for a minute, today, just to put it in perspective of how much that has changed, today, last year, 73% of all valedictorians at all the high schools in the United States were women. 73%. Yes. Yes, exactly, yes. And, oh, by the way, wasn't even that long ago, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is someone I used as a great example. I actually just met Sandra Day O'Connor this past week at a conference that I was at, and she said that when she graduated law school, Stanford Law School, she could not find a job. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg attended law school, she attended Harvard and then Columbia. When she went to Harvard, she was part of the second class that would admit women, and that was only in 1956. So it wasn't really all that long ago. And in fact, there were 9 women in her class, and the dean invited all 9 women to come to dinner, sat them all down, stood sternly in front of them and said, okay, now I want you to tell me why we should have admitted you instead of a man. Now, she was so happy she transferred to Columbia. But you take all this education, and today we see more girls graduating from college than boys. I mean, it's pretty dramatic. Pretty dramatic. And which is not necessarily good news, especially for boys. But as you can see by looking at that, there's a picture there, and that girl sitting in the middle, that young woman, is my daughter. And that's at her graduation from USC. So, and she, by the way, graduated almost 2 years ago, and she has a job. Yay! And she's actually supporting herself, which is great. But that's the good news, that a lot of this education has translated directly into women entering the workforce. Now, what's particularly interesting is that last year was a real tipping point. Because for the very first time in the history of our world, we saw that the workforce consisted of nearly half women. That is something new. And when you delve a little bit deeper and look at what that workforce looks like, the professional workforce, 51% of that workforce is women. So it's the more highly educated part of the workforce. Let me give you some examples. I know when I was growing up, I'm a baby boomer, born in the 1950s. When I was growing up, women were, it was great to be a nurse, but it was unheard of to be a doctor. Today, this is from the 1960s, you can see 6% of all physicians were women. Today that number has risen exponentially. Now it's still not as good as it needs to be, but today we see women graduating from medical school in equal numbers to men. So that's good. Same thing with law school. And here we are in high-tech world. We see it's actually not as good there, but the needle has risen slightly and will continue to rise because we see women like yourselves who are in college graduating from schools of engineering in equal numbers to men. So this is all good news. We're seeing huge progress, and that progress is translating directly into earning power. Now, when you adjust for inflation, we see that men's earning power since the 1970s has barely gone up at all, whereas women's has grown exponentially. Now, before you all start going, oh, yeah, we had a lot of catching up to do. Well, we still have more catching up to do, but we've made huge progress. One of the people I interviewed for my book was former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich, and he told me that he believes in the next 10 years, the average woman will out-earn the average man. Now that's average. So this is a harbinger of change, and change that's right around the corner that is going to translate more and more into power. Let me show you, for instance, how it's affecting families. During the recession, we saw these numbers go up very dramatically. You know, suddenly we have this new phenomenon of trophy husbands. And by the way, you would think some men might not like it. Men are kind of happy with the idea. We were doing discussion groups when I was writing my book, trying to do some first-hand research. Some of them we did were here in the Bay Area, and in one of them it was a group of men, and the men had a huge age range, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and we raised this issue with the men, and there was the one young man, he was about 26, his name was Brad Allen, and if you know him, want to look him up, he's a teacher and also a swim coach. He stood up and he told the group, you know, I really hope that I end up marrying a woman who is very career-oriented, very career-focused, because I'd really like to be the stay-at-home parent. I love kids, I want to be the stay-at-home parent. So the guys in their 20s, 30s, even 40s were like, yeah, I get that, that makes sense. But the men in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, they looked at this young man, Brad was his name, as if he were an alien. They just couldn't understand it. So it is very generationally oriented. And we see young men raised well by their moms, taking on these new attitudes and being very happy with it. We're also beginning to see this is not necessarily just a social justice issue. This is the right thing to do, not the right thing to do. We're beginning to see the effects, the economic effects of this transformation begin to ripple through our economy and through the global economy. Let me give you some examples. For instance, we know when you put women on corporate boards, suddenly profitability goes up. And by the way, it's not just one woman, because one woman is obviously just a token. Two women oftentimes, for some reason, create some kind of conflict on boards. And a mess. We're not going to go there. But three or more creates all kinds of mentorship and sponsorship within the entire organization, not just the board itself, but throughout the organization, and has great bottom line returns. What else are we seeing? We're seeing that when countries, third world countries, are really beginning to hear this message, educate their young girls and women, it actually increases their GDP. So then you see countries like Morocco suddenly, en masse, sending young girls who never were even allowed to go to school. They're creating the resources for these young women to go to school, and it's having bottom line effect on that country's economy. And according to The Economist, the increased employment of women has added more to our economic growth worldwide than technology or the economies of China and India, which we know are growing like crazy. So it's women like you who are really helping us really move our economy forward and growing it in some unique and interesting ways. I'll show you a little video clip.